Jack FM, KTUG Hudson. And here it is, 8:04 in the morning. We got a kind of a special thing going on here this morning at Jack FM. There's a new book out about Benjamin Orr of the Cars. I'm a big fan of the Cars, so is Murray. Hey, good morning, Murray, by the way.
Yes, good morning, Larry. This is a great pleasure, everybody. As Larry just said, both he and I are big fans of the Cars. We go way back with our appreciation for them. I was actually in the radio business in the summer of '78 when their debut album dropped. And of course, it was a very exciting time for music, all kinds of new sounds coming out. But I would argue that really standing alone almost in that somewhat crowded field were the Cars and their debut album, of course, a follow-up a year or two after that. And one of the big figures in the Cars, a central figure, the late Benjamin Orr. Now, what we've got is the author of a fantastic new book. The book is called Let's Go, and it's all about Benjamin Orr and the Cars. The author is Joe Milliken. He's been in the music industry as a journalist, as a website operator for roughly 20 years now. And for the past 11 years, Larry, he devoted a good part of his time to gathering somewhere around 120 interviews to put together that all became part of this great new book called Let's Go. Joe Milliken, welcome to Jack FM.
Murray and Larry, how you guys doing? Great to be here this morning, and thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we're glad to have you because like we said, Joe, pardon me, we're big Cars fans, and this is exciting, specifically to let people know about the contributions of the late Ben Orr. And now, so let's dig right in and talk a little bit about Benjamin Orr, born in 1947. Joe, just leafing through your book and picking up some of the things that I have over the years, from the very young age, Ben Orr knew exactly what he wanted to do. Hello? Well, look at that.
105.1 Jack FM and the Cars with Drive. That was their biggest hit, wasn't it, Murray?
You know, it really was, and I would not have guessed that. I might have thought it was something like
Let's Go.
Let's Go, just what I needed, but Drive, their biggest single. So we got that one out, and of course that is one of our favorite songs here at Jack FM, featuring the great vocals of Ben Orr. Now, during the time that song was playing, we reestablished a connection with author Joe Milliken. Joe, are you with us?
I'm here, guys. I'm really sorry about the drop out there, but hopefully it'll work out this time, and I'm here and ready to go.
Fantastic. Well, look, let's kind of just touch on the fact that Ben Orr, from a very young age, Joe, he knew exactly what he wanted to do. He was blessed with an abundance of musical talent, and literally, I think maybe even younger, but what I'm going to say is at age 13, Joe, he was in his first band.
You are correct. Yeah, Ben knew he wanted to be a musician from an early age. I mean, he can remember being 8 or 9 years old and entertaining his parents and their friends in their living room, singing Elvis songs to them. And you're right. By the age of 13, he was in his first band. He started out as a drummer, taking drum lessons, and there really was no backup plan for Ben. He wanted to be a musician all along, and I always found that quite amazing, because there's a lot of people who go through their whole life and don't necessarily figure out what they want to do in life. I know I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was 13 years old, so the fact that he knew that and saw it through and ended up becoming a famous musician in the end is pretty incredible story to me, that's for sure.
You know, it really is. As you point out, a lot of us don't figure out what we want to do for many years after that. but for Ben Orr, it was very, very focused. So he played many, many instruments. You pointed out he started as a drummer. Later on, as I understand it, Joe, he moved into guitar. And of course, by the time he became part of the Cars, he was on bass.
Yeah, that's another amazing thing about Ben. He was a very versatile musician, and he pretty much would do and adapt his talents to whatever band he was in at the time needed. Like I mentioned, his first band at 13, he was a drummer, and then his first break, if you will, or big break, came when he was 17 years old, and he was in a band called the Grasshoppers. And they were one of the big, he's originally from Cleveland, and the Grasshoppers were one of the biggest bands in the city at the time, and he played rhythm guitar and sang in that band. And then, of course, later on, as you mentioned, when he was in the Cars, he was a bass player, a band that he was in with Rick Ocasek just before the Cars, called Captain Swing. He was just the front man and the singer in that band because they already had a bass player. So Ben was just the type of guy who could adapt to whatever was needed, and he was that versatile of a musician, and it's shown through his whole life. Pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, it really is. You know, let's just focus for a moment on the long relationship that he had with Rick. You know, obviously we know that their partnership together with the Cars became legendary and continued on for roughly 10 years, Joe, but those two guys had met many years before and collaborated on different things before the Cars actually took shape.
Yeah, it was a long and winding road for those two, if you will. I had just mentioned that Ben is originally from Cleveland, and although Rick is from the Baltimore, Maryland area, when he was young in high school, his family moved to the Ohio area, in the Columbus area. So that's how Ben and Rick met. They were both kind of playing in local bands in the same area, and they would run into each other here and there. And then eventually, they got together. They were at a party one night, and they ended up in the basement of this house with instruments around them. And the story goes that Ben picked up an acoustic guitar and sang a Beatles song to Rick. And Rick is quoted as saying that it was the greatest voice he had ever heard. And they became partners at that time. And they traveled around a lot. And by the time they found their way to Boston, it was a good 10 years of just being in different bands and being on the road together and trying to find that right combination of the musical time period and being in the right band, and it finally happened in Boston. So it isn't something that happened overnight for them. It took them a long time and a lot of miles on the road to finally find success in Boston. So they had a long partnership before they even became famous together.
What I found really remarkable reading through the book, leafing through, that they were all drafted at one point back in the early 60s, but then eventually, of course, the Cars debuted. The debut album, The Cars, came out in 78. Sounds like, Joe, you and I are about the same age. Actually, I was raised on country music and hadn't heard very much rock up until that point, but when I heard that album, I was just totally blown away, and still am to this day. I love the Cars, and always have.
Yeah, that debut album is so iconic. I think we were mentioning before we got on the air that it's kind of hard to believe that this year is the 40th anniversary of that debut album. And I was a youngster when it came out. I was 13 years old in 1978, and I was just discovering rock music. And that debut album was one of the first albums I ever heard. And to this day, it's still a part of my regular rotation. And the amazing thing to me about that album is that it's funny, the band has actually joked about that debut album kind of being a great a big influence for me as a kid when I was first starting to get into music, for sure.
Definitely listenable, every song on it. I can't millions of times. I've listened to that album over and over.
That's exactly right. You know, I guess we've got to give credit where credit is due here. Joe, of course, Rick is really the songwriter, and as I understand it, with the debut album, wrote all of the songs. I think Greg co-wrote one of the songs on the debut, but as you know, really, when we look at the entire catalog, Rick, the primary songwriter, and of course, sharing vocal duties with Ben over the years.
Yeah, you're right about Rick. I mean, he was pretty much established as the leader of the band, and he was the main songwriter. He wrote all the lyrics to all the Cars songs. Now, when they would go into the studio, you know, the other guys in the band would be able to contribute their ideas musically. But yeah, Rick is the main songwriter of the band, and I think that there's actually some Cars fans out there that didn't even really realize that there were two singers. I've talked to fans who, you know, thought that Rick did all the vocals, because you know, even though their voices are different, they kind of go in the same vein, if you will, within the style of the band's music. So I guess I could understand where some people might not realize that they were co-lead singers. But Ben, you know, for me, Ben has one of the iconic rock voices of all time. I mean, for me, he's right up there with, you know, Paul McCartney and David Bowie and Paul Rogers of Bad Company. Ben just has such a smooth and distinctive voice, which really comes through on the Drive song that you guys just played. It's funny, when Rick wrote lyrics and brought songs into the studio, he wasn't writing specific songs for each of them. He wouldn't write a song and go, okay, I'm going to write this song for me. Okay, I'm writing this song for Ben. He would go in with the songs into the studio, and they would both take a crack at it and sing it. And then they would kind of feel the vibe from there and kind of determine who should get the song. So they had a very unique partnership, and Ben didn't really mind at all that Rick wrote all the lyrics. Ben wasn't writing lyrics wasn't necessarily Ben's forte. He was great at writing rhythms and the musical part of it. So he was okay with Rick being the main songwriter. And like I said, he would bring the songs into the studio. They would both take a crack at it and kind of decide from there who was going to sing the song on the album. So they had a very unique understanding and relationship, and I think that definitely comes across in the music.
Yep, I agree with that completely. And of course, for 10, 11 years, that partnership endured album after album, just packed with hits, Joe. And eventually came 1988, and just like all things, the Cars came to an end. After that, in the intervening years, of course, Ben got involved with different projects, some solo work. I guess right after the Cars, he had the solo album, The Lace, came out in 1986, actually. And collaborating with him on that was his longtime girlfriend, Diane Gray Page. Now, there was one single that charted on that, as I understand it, Joe, Stay the Night. I recall it. It really hasn't become a big part of the legacy, I would say, but certainly a standout album nonetheless.
Yeah, you know, Ben never really set out to do a solo album. The record label, Elektra, actually approached him and asked him if he wanted to do it. And like I had mentioned before, writing lyrics wasn't necessarily his forte or his favorite thing to do. So his partnership with his fiancée, Diane, really worked out well because she was also musical, and she played piano, and she enjoyed writing lyrics. So they had a very good collaboration. You know, Ben wrote a lot of the melodies and the music, and she contributed a lot of the lyrics. And it worked out really well, I think. And yeah, that album was a couple of years before the Cars actually broke up. I think the solo album came out in '86, and then a couple of years after that, the band actually dissolved. And after the band broke up, Ben continued in music. He took a break for a little while. He was actually working on some songs that were going to become his second solo album. Unfortunately, that never came to be, but he did form a solo band. He called it Or. And Ben just wanted to play music. He didn't necessarily have to be, filling arenas with 10,000 people screaming for him. He did a lot of very smaller type shows in his solo band. He just wanted to play music. It's all he's ever done. It's all he ever did and wanted to do. So the solo band was just a way for him to continue to connect with fans and play music, because that's, like I said, that's all he ever wanted to do.
That's exactly right, Joe, and I guess a guy can't ask for any more than that. As you point out, just kind of rounding that out, in the last years of his life, he really had the privilege of playing with some very, very great and recognized musicians: Mickey Thomas, John Cafferty, Pat Travers, Derek St. Holmes of the Ted Nugent Band, etc. So just as you're pointing out, I think, Joe, he did what he loved to do, get together with other great musicians and play rock and roll. Of course, eventually, in the year 2000, the dreaded news came that he'd been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and after that, Joe, his time was very limited. Well, it looks like once again Joe has dropped out. If history repeats itself, he can still hear us. But Joe, you're off the air. Thank you very much to the author Joe Milliken. His book, Let's Go. It's all about Benjamin Orr and the Cars. If you're interested in picking up that book, got a little bit of information right now. You can, well, I'm sure you can get it on Amazon. You can get just about any book on Amazon. And from the publisher, you can go to Facebook and just type in Ben Orr Book, and you'll get all the information. Ben Orr Book on Facebook, and learn more about this great biography of the late Ben Orr. Well, thank you to Joe Milliken. Again, I suspect he can hear us, but we can't hear him. So thank you, Joe. And Larry, let's get back to some music.
All righty. Thank you very much, Joe. Thanks, Murray. 105.1 Jack FM. 105.1 Jack FM, and once again, the Cars there, and let's go. Well, we've got Joe Milliken back on the phone here for kind of wrap up our little interview that.
Yeah, we're not gonna try to put him back on, Larry, because it looks like there's a little bit of a technical problem. But while the song played, Joe and I were talking, and there is one more resource that we want to get out there. There's a website as well, and again, it's very easy, everybody, to not only learn more about Ben Orr in the book, but to buy it right there if you're so inclined. And again, it's simply called BenOrrBook.com. So you can go there, or else Ben Orr Book on Facebook. Either one is a great place to learn more, and again, to purchase a book if you're as big of a Cars fan as Larry and I are. So that's the only thing I wanted to pass along, Larry.
All righty, thank you.